They carried every drop of water. Nothing on the road ahead would replace it. Around 50,000 men walked off the last cultivated ground in Egypt with the river bright behind them, skins roped along the flanks of the animals, and guides in front of the column who were paid to know the way. The crossing ahead of them was reckoned at 7 days of open sand. They were not walking into the unknown. Other people used that road and have used it since. It ended at an inhabited place with wells in it and shade. They reached that place, walked out of the far side of it, and were never accounted for again. The only ancient account of this march marks its own limit in the same sentence. Beyond that place, nothing more is to be heard of them, except what the people at the far end of the road said. That ground has been searched ever since, and nothing anyone has dug out of it has ever been published. No grave, no weapon, no list of the dead, not one name. Nobody has ever dug one of them out. The absence is not for want of looking. It is for want of a record. Everything the ancient world says about that march is one passage in one book. A Greek traveler called Herodotus wrote it down about a century after the men left the valley. He was open about where it came from, not from anyone who went, from people at the far end of the road who said they had heard it. Everything before that ending is oddly precise. A city they started from, a number, an order given in the words of the order, men hired to know the ground, a named town, and a stage of 7 days to reach it. The order came from a Persian king named Cambyses, who had taken Egypt a year or two earlier, in 526 or 525 BC, and the records split on which. He was at Thebes on the Nile, moving south against the Ethiopians. There he detached around 50,000 men from his own main body and sent them west, with orders, quote, to carry the people into captivity and burn the oracle of Jupiter. Then he turned back himself. Whatever happened out west, it did not happen to him. One man left a written account of that reign from inside it, and he is the reason this story has a witness at all. Ujahorisner had commanded the royal navy of Egypt's last native kings and served as their chief physician. When the kingdom fell, he entered the conqueror's service and composed the foreign king's Egyptian royal names himself. He had every reason to set down what that reign had cost, and he set down a great deal of it, cut into stone. There is no army in it, no desert, no oasis, no storm, no Ammonians. Nor is there one in the other document written from inside that reign, the inscription Darius I had cut into a cliff at Bisetun. It itemizes his own wars and his predecessors' crimes, and it never once mentions an army lost in a desert. 2 documents from inside that reign, and neither of them says it happened, which leaves the order, and the order gives no reason at all. To the people who sent to an oracle, it was not a curiosity. It was the place where a god answered a question out loud through a priest, and the reply was binding on the person who had asked. A king consulted one before a war. A city consulted one before it planted a colony. A man might travel for weeks to put a question to a shrine and carry the reply home as a fact about the future. The shrine this column was sent to burn was famous, and it stood at the far western edge of Egypt's reach, in a hollow of palm groves and salt water. The order says to enslave the people and burn the building. It does not say why, and no ancient source supplies the missing half. The nearest thing to a motive anywhere in the modern literature is a guess, that the king held a grudge against its oracles, and the scholar who offered it as a guess. West of the river, the ground does not go empty all at once. It goes in stages, and the stages were inhabited. The Great Oasis lies around 200 kilometers west of the Nile in a depression some 180 kilometers long. Between them, the ground is bare. Rain there is measured at about a millimeter a year. Daytime temperatures may reach 48 degrees and the same ground may fall to 10 degrees at night. Those are facts about the place. The season the column crossed in is not recorded anywhere by anyone, so none of it is weather on the day. What the road between those stages had instead of water was traffic. Wells were owned and known. A guide was a paid professional out there, not a volunteer, and the track between the wells was worn by other people's animals long before this column stepped onto it. The far end of this particular stage was not a camp either. It was a settled place, with water, a population, and a name the account gives in full. Which brings up the one detail in that passage almost nobody repeats. Every telling of this story names the same destination, Siwa, the oasis where the oracle stood far out to the west. But the Egyptologist Olaf Kapper has pointed at two things in the passage that do not sit comfortably with it. Thebes is not the obvious starting point for reaching Siwa, and the town of Oasis, reached in 7 days, is an accurate designation of the capital of the great oasis, Karga, which is where the road out of Thebes actually goes. That is a detail about a road. By the end of this, it becomes a detail about who might have been standing on it. It began as an administrative act. At Thebes, on the river, around 50,000 men were cut out of a force already marching south and pointed the other way. They were not a picked cause. The passage describes no special equipment and no preparation beyond hiring the guides. They were a piece of a larger army, cut off it and sent west. A body of men that size is a town on the move. Water, food, tents, weapons, the animals to carry all of it, and the water and food for those animals as well. Every one of those things is ordinary in a river valley. Past the edge of one, none of them exist. That is the first hard fact of this march, and it is a fact about arithmetic rather than about courage. The Nile is the last thing on that route that refills anything. Everything the column would drink for the next 7 days had to leave the valley on the day they did, on the backs of animals that were themselves drinking it. 7 days is the figure the account gives, and it is the figure a modern specialist agrees with. 7 days' journey across the sand is an accurate designation of that stage. So the load is calculable in the crudest possible way. 7 days out. Water for men and animals, every day of it, carried from the start, and no margin on the road for a delay, a spillage, or a wrong turning. A column of that size also has a length. Men on foot with loaded animals occupy road. A body of tens of thousands of them takes hours to pass any fixed point. The head reaches each night's ground long before the tail does, and the tail walks the whole day in the dust of what went in front of it. Here is where the record and the story part company, and it is worth being exact about it. The account does not say the water failed. It does not say thirst or heat or exhaustion, and it gives no detail whatever of what the crossing was like for anyone inside it. The word people reach for is thirst, and thirst is an inference, a reasonable one, drawn from 7 days and no water on the road, and it should be heard as an inference and not as a finding. What the sources do carry is an objection to the number. The Egyptologist Olaf Kapper puts it plainly. The figure, quote, seems excessively high, mainly because longer desert journeys are more effectively made with smaller caravans, carrying their own water and food. A smaller column moves faster, drinks less, and carries proportionally more. A very large one is slow, and slowness is the one thing a water calculation cannot absorb. So the figure that makes the story famous is also the figure that makes it hardest to believe, and it comes from a text written a century later by a man who was not counting. Whatever the true number, they had one advantage, that every retelling drops. They were not explorers. They had been given men whose profession was that ground on a stage other people crossed for a living toward a place with a name, wells, and a population. And they got there. The account puts them at a settlement it calls the city of Oasis, inhabited, it says, by Samians of the tribe Iskrionia, which means the last documented moment of these men is a moment with witnesses in it. A settlement in a hollow of palm shade and mud brick, watching a column come in out of the sand, take on water, and walk out of the far side. Nobody there is named. The account does not say whether anyone in that town kept a record of the day, and no such record has ever been found. What we have is the fact of the stop, written down by a traveller a century later who had it from somewhere else. Then they set out west from the oasis, across the sand. That is the last documented act of that column. There is one more silence to put beside it, and it belongs to the man in this story who had the most reason to break it. Uja Horesna outlived Cambyses, served his successor, and set down in stone what the rain had done to his country. Nothing in his stone touches this march. No army, no desert, no oasis, no storm.
Here is the whole of it, in the only words that survive. Thus far, the account says, the army is known to have made its way. Thenceforth nothing is to be heard of them. And then the line that does the real damage in the account's own words, they neither reached the Ammonians nor even came back to Egypt. That sentence is doing two things at once. It says they did not arrive. It also says they did not turn round. Both ends of that road are shut in the same clause. What lies between them is open sand and a column carrying everything it will ever drink. That is a document closing a file. One sentence puts them on the road, the next takes the road away. And the text hands what is left of them openly to somebody else, and whatever happened to them happened after they had already done it once. They had crossed 7 days of that ground, they had reached water at the end of it, filled the skins, and walked back out into exactly the conditions they had just come through. The crossing worked. It is the leg after the crossing that has no ending. Count what is not there. No grave, no battlefield, no casualty list, no second ancient writer. Each of those is a different kind of silence. The western desert preserves what wetter ground destroys. Its excavated sites have given up cloth, basketry, wood, and human remains thousands of years old, and it has never produced a burial from that column. A fight leaves a field, and nobody has produced a field. An empire that ran on written accounting and kept records of a great deal else, left no list of these dead that anybody has found. And there is not one other Greek, Persian, or Egyptian text that mentions the loss at all. And no name. The account gives no commander, no officer, no survivor, not one man. A column of that size, and the record does not carry a single name out of it. An army leaves paper behind it where its paper survives. A muster, a ration, a rank, somebody's son on a list somewhere. Nothing of that kind has been found for this column, and nobody came back who could have supplied it from memory. The account is explicit about that. That is the silence at the center of this story. And it is a silence about people, not about paperwork. The figure is in the book. The men are not anywhere, not in the ground, not in a second text, not in one line set down by anybody who knew them. What the record carries instead is a story told by strangers. The Ammonians said this. About halfway across, the column halted to eat. As the men were at their midday meal, a wind arose from the south, quote, strong and deadly, bringing with it vast columns of whirling sand. It came over them, it covered them. That was the end of the army of Cambyses. That is the sentence everybody knows. It is worth being exact about what it is. It is not a report from the march. Nobody who told it was there. It is what people at the far end of the road were telling a foreign traveler decades afterwards about men who, by the same account one sentence earlier, never arrived at the far end of the road. The one picture the ancient world holds of these men, halted, eating, the sand coming, was supplied by the only people in the story we know for certain they never reached. Everything after that sentence is argument, and the ground it stands on is thinner than the story suggests. So take the famous version first and take it seriously, because it is the version that has carried for 2,500 years. It fails on mechanism. Sand does not work that way. The most quoted refusal comes from the French desert scientist Théodore Monod, who spent his life in the Sahara. Never, not once, has a sandstorm buried anybody. Capers' version of the same objection is flatter still. A column caught in a sandstorm will survive a sandstorm. Storms are not the invented part. The wind out there peaks between March and May, and it raises dust in quantity. What it does is move sand across a surface and take away the horizon. It does not bury a moving column of tens of thousands of men and animals so completely that 2 centuries of searching cannot recover one of them. The evidence that would rescue it has not held either. In 2009, 2 filmmakers announced that they had found the army in the desert near Siwa with weapons and bones. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority put its response in writing and called the reports, quote, unfounded and misleading. 9 years before that, a Helwan University team prospecting for petroleum reported textiles, metal that resembled weapons, and human remains. The Antiquities Service announced a mission to investigate the site in the coming months. Nothing was ever published. So if the weather did not do it, someone did. That is the pivot the whole modern argument turns on, and it runs into a second absence immediately. A battle leaves a field. Arrowheads, harness, blades, bone, a scatter of the ordinary metal an army sheds when it fights. Nobody has found one. Caper, whose own explanation needs a fight, says the column was beaten in ways that we cannot know, and it is not for want of looking. The published survey of the search reads like a list of the last 2 centuries of desert travel. Belzoni in 1820, Wingate in 1933, Almasi in April 1935, and in 1983 and 1984, a search funded by Harvard University, which Caper records in 5 words, a fruitless and unpublished search. A university's money, 2 years of searching, and the only word that reached print about the result of it was fruitless. There is one document that ought to have caught the edge of an event that size, and it is worth being careful with it. Ujahoren Stone says, I saved the population in the dire calamity which took place throughout the whole land. It is a striking line, and it names nothing. Scholars read that calamity 3 ways, as the Persian conquest itself, as a rebellion put down afterwards, or as a piece of conventional self-praise with no particular event behind it at all. Not one of the 3 is this column, and the man who wrote it had no reason to hide a disaster he had not caused. So the shape of the absence is now fairly exact, and that shape is the actual subject of this story. The list runs: no grave, no field, no object anyone has been able to publish, no casualty list, no second ancient text, and not one name belonging to one of the men who walked out of that oasis.
Two contemporary documents that would have had room for a loss on that scale, and neither of them uses the room. What that leaves is a hole with a known edge. We know where they were last seen. We know what they were carrying. We know the direction they took and the number of days the next water was away. And from the moment they walked out of that town, there is nothing, no trace of them in the ground, and no sentence about them written by anyone who saw them go. Which raises the possibility that is least dramatic and hardest to dismiss. Perhaps nothing of that size was lost, because nothing of that size was sent. Reza Muradi Ghiasabadi and Kamya Abdi argue that the account is unhistorical. The evidence is exactly the silence this story has been walking through. One late account, no ancient corroboration, and a figure the leading specialist on the region calls excessively high. The account is not a chronicle. It is a traveller's paragraph, and a paragraph can be inflated. Against that sits the one explanation with excavated material behind it, and it belongs to that detail about the road. Olaf Kapper's argument is that the column was not lost at all. It marched on Dakhla, the next oasis west, and it was beaten there by an Egyptian rebel king named Petubastis IV. His defeat of a Persian force was later modified, in Kapper's words, into the result of an unfortunate sandstorm. Petubastis was 2 seals, a scarab, and 2 pieces of a wooden shrine until temple blocks at Amhida gave up his cartouches and an almost complete royal titulary. A king with a name and no reign. He built a temple in an oasis while an empire came for him. It was demolished, most likely under Darius I, and his name was struck from the king lists. It is the best evidenced explanation available, and it is not proven. The dating fights it. The Great Cliff inscription puts Egypt's revolt at the turn of 522 and 521 BC, months after Cambyses was already dead. That would require that rebel king to have been already active during Cambyses' reign. Uzume Vinsma is hesitant on exactly that ground. Pierre Briant denies the identification altogether. And no battlefield has been produced. One permitted published excavation would settle it, Persian military material lying in undisturbed ground west of the great oasis. In 2 centuries, nobody has produced one. So the word that gets used is vanished, and the word is doing work the evidence has not earned. What is documented is narrower and colder than that. A stated number of men on a stated road with hired guides carrying a week of water at a named town on a stated day of a stated stage, and then a sentence that stops. Somewhere west of that oasis, the ground is the same ground. The wind moves the surface of it in the evening the way it moves it every evening, and it has never yet turned up a mark that anyone could read. Around 200 kilometers east, the river is still running, and it is still the last water on that road. Everything those men were going to drink went out of that valley with them, and none of it has ever come back.